Sophia sat on the edge of the pier, legs dangling over the water, watching the waves lap against the weathered wooden posts. The sky was a bruised mixture of purples and grays, reflecting the storm she felt inside. Her hair whipped around her face in the salty wind, but she barely noticed. For as long as she could remember, Sophia had carried an invisible weight, one that no one truly saw. Friends, family, colleagues, they all assumed she was strong, resilient, unshakable. She smiled, nodded, laughed at the right moments, but beneath that veneer was a storm that raged silently. Anxiety had been her companion since childhood, subtly steering her life, whispering doubts into her ear at every turn. Sophia worked as a journalist, covering stories about politics and human interest. On the surface, her career seemed perfect, fast-paced, thrilling, demanding. But every story, every deadline, every confrontation with reality chipped at her energy. She carried the pain of the people she wrote about as if it were her own, and in the quiet moments she felt powerless, hollow, and alone. Even her apartment, filled with books, photographs, and travel souvenirs, couldn't contain her thoughts. The clutter became a reflection of the chaos inside her mind. Nights were the worst. She would stare at the ceiling, thoughts swirling, the mistakes she'd made, words left unsaid, moments of failure. Sleep came rarely, and when it did, it was restless, haunted by fragmented dreams she couldn't explain. One evening, after a particularly exhausting week covering a violent protest downtown, Sophia walked aimlessly, trying to outrun the storm in her mind. Her feet led her to a small martial arts studio she had noticed but never entered. She paused outside, the rhythmic thump of fists hitting pads echoing through the glass. Without fully knowing why, she stepped inside. The first lesson was brutal. Her muscles screamed, her coordination faltered, but she kept going. Punch after punch, kick after kick. She released tension she hadn't realized was coiled so tightly in her body. By the end of the session, her chest heaved, sweat dripped down her face, and she felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in months: release. Sophia returned regularly, using martial arts as a way to reclaim agency over her body and her emotions. She wasn't trying to become a champion or compete. She wanted control over herself, a way to fight against the anxiety that shadowed every decision. The studio became a refuge, a place where she could physically confront her fears and channel her energy into action. Outside the studio, she began experimenting with other outlets. She joined a local book club, not for therapy or discussion of personal issues, but because she loved literature. Sharing interpretations, laughing at plot twists, debating character motives, these interactions gave her a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. Sophia also began volunteering sporadically at a local animal shelter, helping care for cats and dogs. The simple act of feeding, cleaning, and playing with the animals brought a grounding clarity she couldn't find elsewhere. These small, intentional actions created a sense of purpose, a feeling that her time could be meaningful without the constant pressure of perfection. Yet, peace was fragile. One evening, while walking home from the shelter, she noticed a man following her down dimly lit streets. Panic gripped her chest, freezing her feet. She ducked into a cafe, pretending to text a friend, heart-hammering. By the time she stepped outside again, he was gone, but the fear lingered. The storm inside her mind had found a reflection outside herself, a reminder that control was never absolute. At work, she struggled with deadlines, insensitive editors, and stories that reminded her of the fragility of life. She tried journaling her emotions, but even that was temporary relief. Sometimes, despite the martial arts, the books, the shelter visits, the anxiety crept back with a vengeance, uninvited, relentless. Sophia's family noticed changes. They complimented her discipline, her strength, but she could never articulate the depths of the storm within. She feared judgment or misunderstanding. Her friends saw glimpses of fragility, but assumed it was temporary, something she could push through. They didn't know the nightly battles she waged in silence, the questions she asked herself in the dark. Will I ever feel safe? Will the storm ever end? One particularly dark evening after returning from martial arts class, Sophia found her apartment unusually quiet. She sat by the window, staring at the city lights, feeling a sense of unreality. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to fully acknowledge the exhaustion. Her storm wasn't gone, it had only shifted, moving from her limbs to her mind, curling tightly around her thoughts like a predatory snake. The chapter closes with Sophia, standing on the edge of her balcony, the wind strong against her, the city sprawling endlessly below. She clenches the railing, heart racing, and whispers to herself, I'm trying, but what if trying isn't enough? The storm inside her remains unresolved. Sophia's struggle is ongoing, suspenseful, teetering on the edge between agency and despair. For in the end, we are humans after all.